Hey everybody, Corey Hirsch here. Another episode of the Mind Game. Special guest today, Darryl Sydor, a good friend of mine. I've known Darryl since he's been about 15 years old. We both went to Kamloops together. Darryl went on to play 1,291 National Hockey League games, 2 Stanley Cups, one with Dallas, one with Tampa Bay. And it's going to be a great, his story of recovery, addiction, and everything is inspiring and fantastic. It's going to be a good day. But first, let's introduce my co-host, Dr. Diane McIntosh. Hi, Diane. How are you?
I am grand. Corey, how are you?
Good. We always got to plug your book. We always got to
you.
plug your book. Fantastic. A lot of info in there. Always telling me to read it. I will get to it. I promise.
How can you tell people it's good when I know you have not read that book?
I've read bits and pieces. I tell you that it's all good.
It's
but
for
Diane, yes. So sorry.
People. It's for any person to read. Yeah. Like it's about depression for people who have depression. Love someone who's depressed. You've known people who are depressed. So much you could have learned.
I could have wrote from experience, but not quite the clinical levels that you have. So always pleased to have you. Everything's going good. How was your week this week?
It's a busy week for me every week, but you know what? It's Friday afternoon and I've saved the best for last. Here I am with you. So I'm really looking forward to spending an hour with you.
Outstanding. You're between me and a glass of wine. That's what it boils down to, relaxing. But we're going to bring in Darryl Sydor. Again, good friend of mine. Sid is in the shoe swap these days. He's been in Kamloops back and forth. He's coached in the National Hockey League. He's played in the National Hockey League, and his story is incredible. And Sid, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we got to show this. Here's Sid with the Stanley Cup because you earned that, my friend. That is one of my favorite pictures of you, and what a great picture that is. And then I got one more of those, Sid. So before we start,
with that picture there, I noticed a lot more hair on my Stanley Cup.
On your face too. That's right. Yeah. And this is Darryl and I. We won a Memorial Cup together back in 1992, and you can see Sid in the middle on the ice there, and me with we both quite young, 19 years old each. And Sid, could you imagine if someone came back to that photo after that day and from the future and said, hey, Darryl, you're going to win 2 Stanley Cups, but you're going to go through addiction and recovery. And hey, Corey, you're going to go on to the National Hockey League, get a silver medal in the Olympics, but then you're going to struggle with OCD so bad that you're going to become a mental health advocate in the future, right? You couldn't make that stuff up. You'd never be able to be like, what? I would tell the guy to go, get lost. That's not going to happen. So what interesting life paths. Yeah. But I'll just get you to start with your story. Sid, we played junior hockey together, and I got to be honest, you are the last person I ever thought would struggle with alcohol. You were very dedicated, very focused. When did you have issues and troubles back then playing junior hockey?
Yeah, no, you tagged me right there. I never had any issues back when I was playing junior hockey or growing up drinking or social partying and all that kind of stuff. And I never even had it really with, heading to the National Hockey League. I wasn't one that was a big drinker. I think things that started younger for me, I've been battling alcoholism since 2014, my first treatment, but probably battling alcoholism before that and not coming to grips with it. But, I don't know which way to go, but for me, being able to look back at it now, I was dealing with a lot more of probably OCD. I was dealing with things that I can control because in my upbringing, I never really had control of it. From my inner child, from growing up, I loved hockey and I wanted to play hockey, but I wasn't able to really be a normal kid and experience different things. So, once I got on my own, a lot of people don't know this, but, I became anorexic in probably about 93, 94, somewhere in there.
I do remember.
Yeah. So, I had things in control. I wasn't looking to alcohol. I was looking to things that I can control. I could control my eating. I knew how much a Diet Coke had for calories or a baked potato. And it really affected myself. I was with my wife, Charlene, at the time. We were high school sweethearts since 16, 17. But You know, the first time I got traded from Los Angeles to Dallas, I was always, well, let's take it back. I'm kind of going a little too quick. I was not a physical specimen, you'd say. I always had a little bit of extra meat on my bones and ate well. So, you know, my food intake was something that I could control. I got drafted by Los Angeles Kings, and in a matter of 5 years, and my last time I was about 198 pounds, but I got traded to Dallas in 95, 96. So I was weighed 176 pounds playing in the National Hockey League. So that's my first dealing with mental health, or, you know, and OCD or anorexia and stuff like that. You know, later on that summer, I got together with a trainer here in Kamloops, JJ McQueen, as you know, was in Dallas and helped me with a guy by the name of Dev Mitra. And then I got to see counseling and help with that one thing. But obviously it's led to others.
I'll ask you this too. So for me, when I was with Vancouver, I mean, I had my struggles that I didn't tell anybody, right? Like I tried to hide it. Did you try to hide your anorexia and that from your teammates and you know, and try to hide it from the trainers and the team, or were you able to kind of reach out and ask for help at that point?
No, I still wasn't able to reach out and ask for help. That was just not the way I was brought up, to ask for help or show feelings or, you know, hey, what do I do here? I did not really, I'm not sure if I really hit it, you know. I didn't eat, so that's noticeable. And I had excessive training.
So you get ripped, right? You look like yeah, I get it.
People, you know, at one point, I always thought if I lost a couple pounds, I'd be faster. Well, it got to the point in Los Angeles where some of the players, Rob Blake and these guys, my friends, were starting to notice it really, really affected me, and, you know, talk to the trainers, and, you know, they were worried. I mean, I would ride the bike for an hour after a game, or, you know, do these crazy things that the heart probably couldn't have kept up with, you know, although it did.
Yeah. And you know what, Sid, I apologize for this, because you know what, in junior hockey, we used to make fun of your weight. I do remember that. And, you know, we were just being guys on the bus. That's right. Like, guys made fun of me. We made fun of each other. That's what we did. But, you know, I don't know if that's where it started, but, you know, that's something that could have had an effect on that. You know, and I apologize for that right now at this point, but, you know, we're both have gotten through this. I mean, I was called lots of things on the bus for sure. That's just the way it is. But, you know, I understand your struggles and the feeling. Like, did you feel like you couldn't reach out and get help because it wasn't the manly thing to do? Or did you feel like, you know, you didn't want anybody to know, or it just wasn't in your DNA to reach out and get help?
From what I know now, it was in my DNA. I wasn't able to reach out. I wasn't taught that at a young age, is to show feelings and reach out to people. The biggest thing, you know, I was told, whatever it was just suck it up and get through it. And, you know, that's the thing of willpower. You know, when I got into my addiction and been to my treatments, and I've been to 4, I did not know the difference between willpower and willingness. You know, willpower for me, it got me through a lot, you know, playing the game of hockey, but it also hurt me a lot too. And now understanding the willingness and what it takes to get through this stuff, because we know, and especially me with AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I can't do this by myself. You know, I need a power greater than myself, and that's willingness.
Diane?
Darryl, I wonder, and certainly don't answer any questions you're not comfortable with, but it sounds like most people who struggle with mental illness, it starts early. And it sounds like this started quite early for you, and in a couple of different ways. So with restricting what you were eating, it sounds like ultimately you had a diagnosis of OCD. And I think Corey brought up something really important, which is the fact that, like probably most guys on the bus, you were exposed to some bullying or unkind comments. But often people struggle even earlier than that, sometimes related to their family life. Do you look back and see that there were some challenges, maybe you're past them now, within your childhood that might have been part of setting this up?
Yeah, you know, it's a really good question, Diane. I've probably been one that never really wanted to go back there. I was able to, I went away my last stint in treatment. I don't even call it rehab. I believe I went to trauma treatment center in the Meadows in Arizona. And I was there for 6 weeks. And it's the first time that I was able to get to kind of before I left, I was 18 months sobriety. I went out for a couple days and then I went back into treatment. And the why, why do I keep doing this? And you're right. At the Meadows, you're able to do a week. It's called Survivor's Week. And it's going down and trying to figure out the inner child. And a lot stems from the inner child for me and how I deal with things, how I react to situations. And it was because of my growing up. I mean, I love my parents. My mom's passed away many, many years ago. But they thought they were doing the best that they could do. But it just wasn't. I'm not saying trained me a certain way, but I was learned or taught to be growing up in a certain way, and that's to put your nose to the grindstone and suck it up and don't show your feelings and don't talk about it. So yeah, going through that Survivor's Week at the Meadows, I went back to a 7-year-old child that we did an experiential, and a lot of things came up. And it wasn't just one parent or the other. They both had hands in it on how they were, but I'm not upset or mad at them. I forgive them because I'm not sure how they were brought up. And I don't know if they weren't doing it to try and hurt me. They were just doing the best that they could do, but now I have that understanding of how to deal with that stuff. And it opened me up. It really has opened me up from going to the Meadows and understanding, the feelings, who I am. And yes, like Corey says, I mean, we were all kids back then and we said a lot of probably bad things to everybody, and a lot of names, but I was dealt with a certain way back then. In today's day and age, obviously it can lead to different things.
Yeah, very, really powerful, Darryl. And I just want to say this. I feel like we had a great experience in Kamloops and playing junior hockey. And this isn't about junior hockey. This is about, I thought we played in a great environment. We won a Memorial Cup together. And there are lots of great places to play, but kids do what kids do and boys do what boys do. And so, that stuff, although wrong, that's we were blessed to play in a great place. I will always say that, and I admire you and your courage in what you're saying. And my parents, I don't, they have nothing to do with my OCD. I had great parents growing up, and it's we look at how they were raised, and then what can we do better now? So. Thanks for sharing that, Sid. That's really powerful and important. And so after we'll go on a little bit with your career. We'll get back to more of that stuff. But so then you get moved on. You win a Stanley Cup with Dallas. You end up going a few different stops. How were you doing after you kind of got treatment with your anorexia? How were you doing for the next few years? Were you still struggling a bit, or were there things going on, or did you feel like you put that behind you?
Well, it's always there. I mean, till this day, I don't really weigh myself. And if I do weigh myself, I probably have a little pity party for a bit, but I don't dwell on it as much because the weigh scale controlled my day back then. I mean, I would weigh myself, I don't know how many times a day, but it was controlling. So as for getting back to the eating and getting the weight back on and the nutrition and stuff like that. I never really, it took a while, but it didn't really affect me as much in my travels, eating and stuff like that. I mean, I always watch what I ate. My wife, Charlene, is an excellent cook, and, we eat quite healthy, but, since COVID, we do have our ice cream cones at night.
Diane, is anorexia? It's not very common with men, is it? Or is it just something that's not talked about?
Well, it's far less common in men, and unfortunately, that means that a lot of men who are struggling with exactly what you're talking about, Darryl, don't get diagnosed. And also as part of having OCD or challenges with obsessions or compulsive behavior can be part of that body dysmorphia, or looking at your body in a really negative way, and all kinds of really negative behaviors in response to that. Like you said, being stuck to your scale, looking at your body in a negative light, in a way that you can't pull yourself away from it. And a lot of young men really struggle with that, and often not diagnosed, not talked about, but can take hours and hours and hours of time where you're just negatively evaluating yourself. And I think it's even getting worse now when younger people are faced with social media all the time. So if your picture's out there, people are making comments that you don't even know. And if you happen to read those, you can imagine, Darryl, when you were younger, if you were constantly having a stream of comment about what your body looked like, how devastating that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Darryl. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead. No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's that's what I wonder, because it's like I struggle with it. I struggled it through, especially going to be a professional athlete. Sid, like, we were supposed to look a certain way. We were supposed to be a certain type of fitness. We were supposed to have a certain type of body fat. And you look around the room, and there are other guys that are absolutely ripped. I didn't have that body type. That wasn't my body type. I didn't put in the work either, so that probably didn't help. But I didn't have that body type, right? You weren't that body type. So there's such a different dynamic with that. But,
Corey, I'll just go back on that a little bit. I remember it just came to me in Columbus. We had John Tortorella as a coach there. And we had a really, really intense training camp and physical fitness testing for it. I was not, like you say, everybody's body type's different. I was not one. They traded for me. I was an older guy, kind of brought in for leadership. Actually, sorry, it wasn't Columbus. We had John Tortorella in Tampa.
Yeah, you had him in Tampa.
Yeah, in Tampa. And one of the things was his fitness testing. It's a grueling, not only just one day. It's about 4 days.
Yeah.
And one of it was running. We had to run a certain amount distance in a certain time, or else you're kind of penalized for it. I'll never forget. They asked me, about running. I said, what does this really have to do with, we had a young guy from Finland that I think he ran like a 4.5 minute mile, and he just blew it away. But he was one of the first cuts. And myself, after my run, they said, well, good thing we're not here for running. I said, well, I know where I get my paycheck. You want me to do it on the ice? It doesn't matter what I do. I said, why do you do that? He goes, well, just to make sure it was a threat, just to make sure that we trained through the summers that we ran,
And
everybody is different.
I worry about that test for like the whole summer, and some crazy stories with that too. So then you win 2 Stanley Cups, but then you retire, and now you don't have hockey anymore. And the transition out of hockey can be, it's a really difficult transition. All of a sudden you can't get paid. And Sid, you're the type of guy that I always knew that hockey, I mean, you were so dedicated, and you were one of the most dedicated guys I knew. What was that like, coming out of the game and retiring after so many years pro and 2 Stanley Cups?
Well, and this is where it probably all changed. This is where, in my retirement, the latter part of my career, I wasn't playing as much. I was more of a mentor on the ice. I'd get put into games. I was in Pittsburgh at the time, not playing a lot. Mike Yo was there as a coach. He was an assistant coach, and we spent a lot of time together because I wasn't playing. So my retirement, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to play and just keep doing the 6 days a week training, and I was getting older. I could see it going down. He got offered a job in Houston as a head coach there, and he called me up and heard I was thinking about retirement and offered me an assistant coaching job there. So my retirement lasted about, 48 hours, if that. I got thrown into that. Now it's what, I don't know what I was going to do with my knowledge and give back to, kids and stuff like that. So it switched big time. So you talk about stressors when you play as an athlete. Now you have stressors as a coach that I had no idea about coaching. Basically, it's just my experience of playing. and how do I deliver that now to players? Now I got video. Now I got to present in front of people. The stressors were really high, and that's probably a lot when the drinking really picked up for me.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did the drinking start for you? Was it the stress? Was it an escape? Like, what was it for you?
Well, I mean, drinking for me I was always one that could drink a lot, and I wasn't really affected a lot. A lot of my friends and stuff, they would see me drinking, and I never really got that crazy buzz or blackout. But what happened was it was more drinking, and then it was lying and sneaking. The drinks, drinking before I had to go do something, go to any kind of social. It was just drinking now is that control that my eating was.
Yeah. Wow. Diane?
I wonder who around you knew this was going on, Darryl. Were you were saying kind of sneaking around? Were you drinking in a way that was really undercover, or did your wife know, and was she expressing concern, or were you hiding it from everyone?
Yeah, she was expressing concern. I remember times in Houston, expressing that maybe I drink too much. And the other thing too is, the concussions that didn't go marked. Like back in the day, they didn't really regulate the concussions. I know for a fact I had one documented, but and I had to pull myself out of the game. So now I'm also dealing with that. To be honest with you, a lot of people probably knew that I had a drinking problem, but in the alcoholic mind, I didn't think maybe anybody really knew, except for my close, my partner and my wife.
And
go ahead.
What made you realize, or made you decide that you were going to make a change?
Well, it's been ongoing since like I said, from 2014 when I first went to a treatment facility in Canada. Then I went to a couple more down in the States after a good portion of sobriety, and then I would go back. But this time here, it feels different. It's just, I'm on 7 months now, sobriety, but coming from the Meadows, I just feel it's, I wish obviously I had that my first time, but maybe I wasn't ready. They always say with addicts, you don't know, who knows when they're ready or where their darkest hole is going to be. But it was getting to the end of my line for sure, with family, with friends, with everything. So I really wanted the why, and to understand it. And, now I feel I have a pretty good foundation thanks to all the doctors and people at the Mayo that helped me.
Yeah. I went to Malibu. Remember? We sat there, and you were there for a week, and it was, or I don't know how long you were there. It was, I remember going in, and, I was really proud of you then for going and getting treatment. And we sat there, and I thought you had, had a good grip on it. And then, why do you think you fell back into that? Just because you weren't ready? Or how does somebody become ready to be able to grasp that so they can really be in a place where you're at right now?
Well, that's a good question, Corey. I'm not sure if you can ever, I don't know the real answer to that when you're ready. But speaking from myself, it was basically surrender. Like enough was enough, and I was tired. I was drained. I was just done with all the garbage that I've been not only dragging myself through, what I was dragging my family through, my kids. That's the biggest thing. I had a DUI in I think it was 2015. I had a DUI in Minnesota, and with myself, social media, it was all over. It was all over ESPN. It was all over TSN. So it's very hurtful. And my kids, the strength they have, and my family, the strength they have to be able to get through that, because our life is not a quiet life.
No.
Anything I do, it's out there.
Yeah.
Well, so, I do remember one time, Corey, and you say, like, I thought I was ready when I was at Summit, and I thought I got a lot of good work, but there's still something missing. And, it was this, getting, like Diane said, getting down. A lot of the, the Meadows is a treatment facility that doesn't only deal with alcoholism. It deals with eating disorder. It deals with PTSD. It deals with everything. And they have a Survivors Week for everybody, because everything does stem from something from the ages of 0, when you're born to, I think it's 17 years old. And that's where they focus on, because there's something there for everybody. If they, you know what, at the Meadows, they'll find it.
Yeah. Diane, you talk about that all the time.
Yeah, that it's a topic called epigenetics. And what it essentially means, you probably heard that at Meadows, that what happens in your life, early in life particularly, can change the way your genes work, the way your genes make proteins. That when you have early life trauma, and that we tend to think about trauma as being, you're sexually abused, you're physically abused, but it can be chaos, it can be neglect. There's a whole many different ways that people are affected in their early childhood that makes them vulnerable later in life to mental health problems, but also physical health problems. And so when we're trying to pin down, well, what caused this problem, there's never one issue. There can be issues related to childhood. There can be just social. You were under a lot of stress, Darryl, in your new role, for instance. And there could be a genetic piece to what you experienced. And all those together are what led you to ultimately be sick. And as you're talking about alcoholism, it's probably very helpful if you're able to share, because everyone's journey is a little bit different. Some people don't think that they're drinking too much. Others wonder if they're drinking too much. And everyone looks a little different. Some people are drinking all the time. Some people are just binging on the weekend. And I'm sure both of you have been exposed to a lot of people who have identified themselves as being alcoholics, and probably every person is different that you've met.
Yeah, for sure it is. And, I grew up in a, they may not like it, but I grew up in an alcoholic family, I believe. My mom was a banker that came home from work and she would have her beers. My dad was a city employee that worked in the light and power in the yard, and they'd come home and there was always alcohol around. But for me, alcohol was my medicine, and that's where I knew there was a problem. It wasn't the occasional, I'm not the normie. I can't be a normie, because I just have a chemical imbalance that I'm allergic to alcohol, and I don't know what's going to happen. And one is not enough, and 1,000 is not enough either. So, I knew I depended on alcohol. I needed it to. It was my medication.
Yeah. And Darryl, you and I have talked, like I had my issues too, where, we had talked after, an incident that happened in my life. I went through a time too. And now it's something that I have to watch. It's moderation. And it can affect any of us. And in fact, growing up, alcohol is glorified. Like, I remember playing junior together, Sid. Like, remember, it was like, that was the thing. You'd get beers on the bus, and it'd be the rookies would have to pass them to the back of the bus, because that's where the veterans sat. And you got 1 or 2 beers, and that was it. And then if you're underage, you weren't allowed to drink, and you had to pass them back to the guys that were of age. So, right from the get-go, like, we were taught that, alcohol is something that's glorified, and it really isn't. I've seen it destroy lives and families, and, and Diane, you can speak to this because you've seen a lot of that, I'm sure.
Well, to your point, Darryl, I think a lot of people who are struggling when they're younger with mental illness starting, and that's generally when it starts, is in the teen years. Corey's experience certainly was the same. You don't know who to talk to. As you said, you grew up not being comfortable, I guess, expressing what you're going through. And so how are you going to manage those feelings, those experiences that you're having? Well, I'll just numb myself out by drinking. So your drug of choice was alcohol. And of course, unfortunately, a lot of people are choosing other things and end up with opioids or cannabis, whatever it is that people end up. Really, the only way that they can cope ultimately is by using a substance. And it sounds like that's where you ended up as well.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
My like you say, going back, about the abuse and the trauma and stuff like that growing up, I was never physically abused or anything like that, but, getting down to it was a lot of emotional abuse. Not having the, that's basically what it came down to.
Yeah. Did you suffer, like, was it anxiety? Were you depressed? Like, what did you deal with mainly?
It wasn't so much, I don't think, depression. I think it was more probably anxiety of, you know, not, not, although I had a really good career and was able to accomplish a lot, not being strong in my own belief that I was good enough, because I was never taught that I was good enough. I was always had to get better and better and better. So I pushed myself extra hard. And, that's probably one of the biggest things is that I never ever thought I was good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And, another thing that I want to touch on too is the support of your partner. How big of a role your wife has had in this. She's, I've known Charlene for a lot of years and I've always had a ton of respect for her. How important is the role that she has played in your sobriety and your journey as well?
Well, it's obviously really important, and I think it's huge. The amount of love, compassion, and understanding that she's still with me. To be honest, we have an outstanding family, but I think, for what I've put her through, the ringer of being living with an alcoholic or an addict, not an addict, but an alcoholic, it's been trying on her. And but the support she always has amazes me to this day. And really since COVID's happened, and the professional help that we've got with therapists and stuff like that, being quarantined has been a blessing for myself and the family. Really, I cannot remember the amount of time that we've had dinner together, this whole time. Because we run such busy lives with kids, hockey this way or that way, and things going on. You're not able to sit down and have a meal together, but we've been able to have a lot of good time together through this.
Yeah, Diane, and how important is that family support? And to what extent, do you give someone chances? Do you give somebody opportunities? What I love about Darryl is that he's not giving up on himself, right? He's just not saying, "Oh, I'm not going to get help." I mean, this is a man that's trying to help himself. This is a man that's gone to therapy. This is a man that has checked into facilities. And how important is that he's been able to do that?
Well, I guess there's two parts to your question. One is the most important protector for mental illness, for your ability to get through it, is being loved by someone, by having social support. So Darryl knows that. I know, because he's had a partner. And by the way, your greatest love of your life is usually your first. So you being, high school sweethearts and ending up staying together, those are the marriages that tend to last the longest. Even if you lose your early love and then find them later in life, that ends up being a marriage that lasts forever. That's quite an aside. But family support, massively important in making it through that. But then we have to realize that empathy does have its limits. And so, Darryl, obviously you're reflecting on the fact that, yeah, she stuck by me, but she was traumatized through that experience, right? You think you're going to lose your partner whom you love, you watch them falling apart, but you obviously have a very strong relationship that you've been able to pull it back together and find that sense of love and family again through all that. One thing that I want to mention, because it's so important whenever I talk about trauma and the importance that it has on later life, maybe causing you to have mental or play a role in mental and physical health, because you have experienced trauma, abuse in your background, it's not a fait accompli. It doesn't mean for sure that you're going to have mental illness or you won't be able to recover. It's part of everyone's journey. But to your point, Darryl, it's valuable to understand where you came from, and it certainly made me, or where your symptoms came from, but understanding the power of an early life experience and how it can lead to mental health challenges, physical health challenges, I think made me a more empathic psychiatrist as well. It gave me more patience because it helped me to recognize that people come with a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't ask for. And so it gives you more patience as a caregiver. And I hope it gave you more patience with yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well said, Diane. And so, Sid, if you could, for someone that has a partner out there that's listening, that's struggling like you were, what is something that you can offer them right now, of hope or encouragement or support? How do you support someone, who might have a partner that's dealing and struggling with some of the things that you did? What can they do to be able to support their partner and hopefully help them along a path that they can get on like you did?
That's kind of a tough question for me, not being on that other side.
Yeah. We'll have one with Char later.
Yeah, it's a field that we'd love to get into. So, but the understanding of addiction, alcoholism, any kind of eating disorders it's really important for the I guess the other half or the partner to understand it. It's not something that we chose to drink and chose to numb, but you have to understand, I guess, the biggest thing is, and I can't speak for Char, but the understanding of what the alcoholic goes through. And I'm not even probably saying that right. Diane might be able to explain more on that, but there's a lot of, Char was able to come down for a family week, which is also offered. And basically what we do in 6 weeks, they get a crash course in 1 week. And I think it was really beneficial to understand what we kind of work on and what we go through in kind of in the addiction, world and the medical, how they help and stuff like that. So it's a tough question for me to answer because I'm on the other side, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Diane?
I learned as a young psychiatrist treating military members actually who had PTSD related to traumatic experiences. And they were very, very ill. It took a long time for them to get better. And their partner was essentially, whether it was a male or a female, picking up all the childcare work. Maybe they were the only one who was working because their partner was on disability. And what I learned from that is, to a person, their partner got sick. Once the person who was ill finally started to get better, the person who was supporting them started to develop depression or anxiety. And it made me learn very early on how important it was that I wasn't just taking care of the person who was my index patient. I owned the whole family. That it was my job to make sure that people were educated, they understood what was going on, that they were being taken care of. Because if we don't take care of partners, they'll get sick because they're trying to support someone who's really struggling. And it helps them to build empathy, to understand, what is OCD? Why was he so hard on himself with his weight? When she saw that, she knew what you were doing. Why does he drink? What's happened in his childhood that's led to this? And it's not just your childhood. What are all the factors that came together? So I think an educated partner, an engaged partner, getting your partner involved in your healthcare, that makes all the difference in your recovery and your sustained recovery.
So just reiterate, you'd recommend in situations where the partner actually goes to therapy with the spouse? Absolutely. Or is that's quite important.
If you can, not necessarily every time, but I say to my patients, and I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm not spending all my time doing talk therapy. I do medication, but I talk to my patients and I say to them, every single time you want to bring your partner, bring them along. You don't have to tell me ahead of time. And some people come with, whoever their loved one is that they trust, their mom, their husband or their wife, their kid, whomever they trust and want to help to be their primary support through this journey, bring them along. Sometimes people come every time and sometimes just now and again.
Yeah. And Darryl, you're very open about all this. I imagine you're very open with your children as well. And how important is that to speak with them about, what you've gone through and, things for them to watch, as they're growing up, and letting them know, like we had an episode where I had my daughter on last week, and we'd always talked about mental health throughout growing up, and it actually, really helped her. So, whereas mine came on, my parents we just didn't talk about it. Right. How important is that role of you talking with your kids and supporting them and having them involved in mental health in your home?
Well, I think it's a key. It's of high importance to understand. Obviously, myself going away and getting professional help. I've traumatized my kids and I've traumatized my wife. We have a couple boys that go to therapy. So it's important that they have an understanding. That I want to kind of break that chain of communication, and communication is probably one of the key things, and be able to show feelings, and be able to talk about them. One son was in the car with me when I had my DUI, and I traumatized him. And every time I went away for treatment, it's traumatizing to them that their dad's leaving them again. So it's important that we're able to talk about things. And that's where my wife is outstanding. She's a very strong woman. And she loves the field of mental health, and listened to a lot of people. And one of her biggest, Glennon Doyle is huge. We were listening to that the other day. We were going into Kamloops on a drive, listened to her second book, I believe it is. And I've read Love the Warriors also with her. So, just understanding a little bit of the mental health, but it's so important to be able to involve your kids in it too, like Diane said, through your therapy or through your, when you come home, to be able to talk to them, because it's not a one-way street. And, that's one of the things, me growing up, I was never able to talk about it. And to be able to break the chain, whether they drink or not, or whatever they do, to have the understanding that we can still talk about things when they struggle or when they are good.
Yeah, well, very well said, Darryl. I'm going to throw this at you right now too. What role and how do you feel about masculinity now compared to 20 years ago when you were playing in the NHL? You were a warrior. Like, you played hard. You got your nose dirty. You didn't fight a ton, but you played hard. And I do remember your first fight, by the way. We won't bring that up here in Kamloops.
I think I had to protect you on that fight. And I got it right between the eyes in Victoria.
Absolutely. But, masculinity of where you see it today as opposed to where you saw it growing up and as kids, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think masculinity is, manliness. From where we grew up, to be a man was to be strong, proper, physical, suck it up, do all those type of things. But to me, masculinity now is being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that shows nothing but great strength, to be able to be open, to be able to be open to talk about it. To me, that's masculinity. Vulnerability is probably one of the biggest things that I've had to overcome.
Yeah.
Because of just where I took my career and what I did. Because anything I ever did, it would get out there, bad, let's say. Maybe not so much the good, but the bad always got out through social media or whatever it was. Being vulnerable, I think, is one of the greatest strengths that is one of the greatest strengths you can have, because it opens up. And if you're open up to willingness and talk and open to other people, I think that's where, I think to me, that's what masculinity is today, is to be okay in your own skin. Like Diane said, is to feel good about yourself, to be able to talk about it and not worry about what other people say. Because I've learned now, even with some people watching, that, I feel good in myself, and I cannot really worry about what the other person thinks, because that will take me down the wrong road.
How do you talk to your kids now, Darryl? Because I brought up about social media and how it's changed, even just over the last few years, where kids are constantly exposed to haters online and people making comments about them personally, maybe people they don't even know, reflecting on a picture. How do you talk to your kids about that? How to manage the world of social media?
Well, it's tough. It's the one thing that we have to do right now. Shar and I are talking about just how to limit not social media so much as gaming.
Yeah.
This gaming is kind of, it's out of control. And it's something that we have to, we're trying to talk about limiting and that kind of stuff, because you're right. You get on there with other people that you don't do, or something said. Yeah, we've had, not to get in specifics, but we've had it where we've had to come up and talk to, our son about what was just said, or what he just said, and how to treat other people. Because it's a microphone, you're not there, and people say what they want to say. And, it could be right. It can't be right.
Yeah. And that's, so there's, when we had Clint Malarchuk, I Google Clint Malarchuk. What's the first thing that comes up? Pictures of him getting his neck cut, right? Like, I Google your name. What's the first thing that pops up? Darryl Sydor, DUI, right? I Google my name. What's the first thing that pops up? Corey Hirsch, mental health, OCD issues, right? Like, it's such a fishbowl that we live in, and all the wonderful things that you've done, or Clint's done, or I've done, those usually aren't the first things that pop up, right? Those aren't the things that pop up. And it's tough to live in a spotlight like that, and well earned, right? I mean, we were blessed to play in the National Hockey League. Your career was much better than mine. But in the same sense, it's tough to live around that. And it's tough when your kids see that stuff, right? When they Google your name. And we live in, it's what do we say? Now it's guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty, right? It's like, it's a tough world to live in. And Diane, I'll let you speak to what Darryl said about vulnerability, because I thought that was incredible, and how important vulnerability is in recovery.
Everyone's different. I always try to be careful not to impose my thoughts about what will help people to recover. I think people have to find their own path. And I'm sure, Darryl, when you've gone through a few different sessions of recovery, every time you learn something new about yourself. So you've been through a lot to get to here, where you're able to say vulnerability is something I needed to get better. Some people hold on to their vulnerability because it's just not safe enough. And I just don't want to, I'm always cautious not to impose what I think might help someone to find their way forward, because probably you didn't come to this vulnerability place, I may be wrong, until maybe more recently, as you've learned more about yourself and you've recognized, I need to do this for me, and it's made a difference for you.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I haven't really come to it until probably the last, 7 months and 1 week, that I've been able to come to the grips with that I'm perfectly imperfect. Yeah. And, it's okay. Because, with all the willpower we talked about before and stuff like that, perfectionism was probably in there too. I wanted to be perfect. So I couldn't have a down day or do something wrong. But this last time, there was a certain point, and I believe in my sobriety and my mental health, where I kind of got better. And there was a time where it was about 16 days before I was supposed to leave treatment. I was there for 4 weeks. Every treatment's different, 30 days, 28 days, and I had my airplane ticket booked. And I was doing really well in the 4 weeks, and they were going to let me go and sign off, the psychiatrist and everybody, my senior. But there was a point where I was on the phone with my wife, and I just came from the psychiatrist, and I said, are you sure that I'm able to leave? Like, have I done well enough for you to think? She goes, yes, you've done fine, but we would like you to stay. And I mentioned that to my wife, and on that phone call, there was a switch that just changed. And she said, see, they want you to stay. And I didn't put up a fight. I've always put up a fight. And I just calmly said, okay, I'll stay. And that was, I think for me, the turning point in my recovery, where it's surrendered. Yeah. And I was able to stay the extra couple weeks, and she was able to come down and experience Family Week. And it's been a process ever since. But I never had that before. I never had that experience or that feeling. And I think what I was able to learn in the coming weeks was just that vulnerability and letting go.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw this out there. So Wendy Tippett chimed in. Shar is the best. It's Dave's wife who coached you. We love Dave and Wendy. And yes, Wendy is correct. Shar is the best. It's she's a sweetheart, and she does so many great things for you guys as a family too. We'll have to get her on too. We could get.
Oh, I'm sure she would love to.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's come to today, Sid. Let's strategies to staying sober. Like, how do you do it now today? How do you manage yourself and moving forward, having gratitude, and we always talk about gratitude and things like that. Just what does strategies look like for you today moving forward with sobriety?
Well, since I've been back, it's my recovery's come first. So it's where do I have my routine in my recovery? A lot of people might not know what I'm doing through it, but there's prayer, there's some self-care time. There's my AA meetings that, since this whole COVID thing, I was able to start an AA meeting online with our home group, and I run that now every day at noon, and then just some other meetings. You can look at the different things that COVID has thrown us, but it's what you do to make it better. And although there's a lot of uncertainty with this pandemic, I've grown stronger. I believe in my recovery and reaching out, and you can go to meetings all over the world now, if you choose to. So, that's where my recovery has been strong, and just the understanding of my own self and worry about me. I just turned 48 a couple of days ago, and there was a time through that day that my wife noticed something. She's like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And it was feelings, it was feelings of how thankful I am, and I never used to show that kind of stuff, so, that's where I am today in my recovery and dealing with all this.
No.
I love what you said about what I believe in my DNA, honestly, which is out of terrible things. I learned this from treating people who have PTSD, is that out of horrible things, good things can come. So this horrible pandemic that the world is living through, but there are good things that have come from this for many people. And I think trying to find those silver linings. Darryl, I wonder if you would speak for a moment about a gift that I give myself. And I know, because I heard you say it at the beginning, and I wanted to come back to that you've given yourself, which is the gift of forgiveness. That every time I forgive someone, it's not for them, it's for me. And you talked about, you've moved past some of the stuff that's happened in your childhood. But I think one of the greatest challenges when people have gone through as much as you have is actually being able to forgive yourself. And how has that been? Are you still on that journey, or do you feel like you're there?
I think that was probably one of the biggest things too, is to forgive myself. You have to forgive yourself before anything else. And, I think I've been able to do that, but my actions are going to speak a lot louder than my words now, because I used a lot of words. I don't know how many times I've used sorry, or I won't do it, or all that kind of stuff. Those don't mean anything anymore. It's my actions that speak louder than words. And until I was able to forgive myself and move forward, and forgive my childhood, and not use that as a pity party or a stool for going back out. Understanding of that now and moving forward to strengthen. And there's no better thing now in what we can do, like Corey's doing and yourself's doing, is spreading the word. That's my ultimate goal, is to spread the word, because if we go back a little bit to retirement, stuff like that, I wasn't prepared for retirement. The NHL got me into the NHL to play hard and work hard, but once that door closed, we didn't have those avenues, and Corey probably knows that too. We didn't have those avenues of mental health preparation for retirement. And we've seen so many people go down the other road, and then the doctors are there when you've stumbled and you're on your knees. and that's one of the things I'd like to get into, is to try and spread word for people, early retirement or whatever, to try and get out, because you put so much time into this physical straining sport, but the mental side of it, it's going to come and bite you in the ass if you're not getting strong or getting any help. Just like the alcoholic. If I'm not doing my recovery, I got this devil on this shoulder that's pumping, just waiting for the tires, pumping his tires, waiting for my one slip up. And that's where I need to have my recovery strong to be able to push that away. So there's no other better field that I'd love to get into, is to help prepare players, especially at this age where they're younger, get into a lot more funds than we did. But, to that next level of life, because there's a lot of life, and you don't need to go through what I've gone through. You don't need to go through that to finally at 48 years old. And I don't have it figured out, but I'm starting to understand who I am now.
Wow, Darryl. We're gonna probably cut it off right there, because that was just a fantastic way to to finish this. Being able to forgive yourself, and I say that too, is everyone talks about forgiving other people. Well, you need to forgive you first before you can forgive anybody else. And Sid, I'm so proud of you. I know it's been a battle for you. I know it's been a journey. That I will support you, whether you slip and fall again or whether I slip and fall again. You'll be right there for me too. I love you, buddy. It's been, we've known each other a long time, and I want to thank you for coming today and sharing your story, and just how powerful, and, you're going to help a lot of people. You're going to do some wonderful things moving forward. Thank
you for having me, Corey, and thank you, Diane.
I love hearing these two hockey guys saying they love each other. It's the nicest thing ever. So nice
it's okay
to meet you.
Show feelings, Corey.
I know. I love it. Thank you, Darryl. Congratulations for all your hard work.
Wow. What a story. Hey, just incredible. And he's going to help a lot of people. And that's, there's healing in helping others. That's, every time I do this, I get healing out of it. I mean, it takes me a couple of days to come around again, but I don't know how you do this for a job, because it's draining just to, and just, but it feels so good to hear it. And Darryl is, like I said, I've known him forever, and just so proud of him for getting the help. And you know what? He might slip and fall again, but that's okay, because I know he's going to get better. I know he's going to do it again, and he's going to go out and he's going to get help, and he's going to do awesome. So hopefully this is it for him. Hopefully he continues on this path. It sure sounds like he's in a good place.
I don't think there's anything that makes us feel better than helping others. We all go out and we work, and we got to get a car, or, pay our rent, take care of ourselves. But that you do for others and help others, it makes such a massive impact on how we feel about ourselves and the world. Something we need to follow up on at some point is the challenges of retirement. And it's not just if you're struggling with a mental illness, it's actually, even if you don't have a mental illness, moving from being an elite athlete into the real world, that's a challenging journey. And there's a lot that can be done to prepare yourself for that, because I think a lot of people, once they've left, actually are quite vulnerable in retirement to getting depressed, starting to abuse substances.
Yeah, it's rampant in the National Hockey League, any professional athlete, but there's other people out there too. I mean, and it's fine. It's refining a purpose. That's what I had to do. I had to refine a purpose, and mental health has put me on that path. But I know it's difficult to find, and for a lot of people, you're right, they do struggle. But anything else you brought out of today's episode that you want to recap before we sign off here?
Well, I think to the retirement point, it's starting early. To think about, what is my future going to look like, and how do I get ready for that? And it's not even related to mental health, but it protects your mental health on the other side. Because like you said, it took you a long time to find your purpose. It also took time to get well. But I think we have to think about retirement, especially as young elite athletes, well before they're done.
Yeah. And that's a whole different show, a different everything. And it's, I've struggled through it. A lot of us have struggled through it, but Darryl shared about vulnerability, forgiving yourself, the ability to communicate with your family, having a supportive partner. There's just so many things involved in it. And we're just so thankful that Darryl was able to share his story with us today, because, wow, was that powerful.
That was a gift.
And what a great day today, Diane. Thank you so much for being with us again, my wonderful co-host. And we'll have a couple more episodes next week, I'm sure, for the mind game. Thanks again, Diane, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, Corey.